A pleasant good evening to you all. On behalf of the Athletics Association of Barbados, let me be the first to welcome you to this, the third in the suite of webinars produced by the association under the broad theme of the sports person and COVID-19. My name is Noel Lynch, and I presently serve as the first Vice President of the Athletics Association of Barbados. I will be your chairman for this evening's event. Today's webinar can be followed on the Zoom virtual interactive platform or via the video sharing website, YouTube. Wherever you are, many thanks to you for joining us this evening. This activity follows on the heels of what were for numerous commentators, two very well received engagements on this very important subject. Our first webinar was entitled Competitive Sports in the Age of COVID-19. The second, Medical and Psychological Considerations for Sports During COVID-19. This event is broadly themed The Way Forward, a Return to Competition, and specifically labeled as a Stakeholders Forum. In that regard, we seek to appeal to our competitive athletes, to coaches, to parents and guardians, aficionados, and general followers of this, the most natural of all sports, and from which all other sports take its lead. Ladies and gentlemen, we have assembled a very distinguished and knowledgeable panel of presenters who will address you this evening on the following topics: track and field during COVID-19, preparations and protocols for the Carifta Games 2021, the AAB's 2021 competition schedule and its implications for all stakeholders, training and competing in the COVID-19 environment, and health protocols for training and competition. The format of this evening's gathering will be an initial presentation by each panelist, followed by an initial round of questions to that particular presenter. After the final presenter has made his or her submission, the floor will then be open for questions and or comments to any or all of our panelists. You can interact with the panelists posing your questions or comments by utilizing the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen, or posting your questions and or comments in the chat, another feature which is available via Zoom. Additionally, you can forward your questions and or your comments via the chat feature if you're viewing via the YouTube platform. However, if it is your intention to participate in the discussion and there is space available, we encourage you to sign in via the Zoom platform for ease of interpretation and explanation of your submission. I will remind you of these options after each presenter has made the initial submission and after the final panelist has presented. We implore you to keep your questions and comments succinct and to the point. We further exhort you to acknowledge and respect the prerogative of the chair, to trust the process, and to be respectful to all participants at all times. With those opening remarks, please permit me to introduce our first presenter. Ms. Catherine Jordan presently serves as the president of the Athletics Association of Barbados, a position that she has held for the past 8 years, having first been elected to the position in 2013 and subsequently re-elected in 2017 and 2020. She also serves as the vice president of the North American, Central American, and Caribbean Confederation, the hemispheric governing body of track and field. President Jordan also served the Amateur Athletic Association of Barbados, the forerunner to the AAB, in the capacity of secretary from 2009 to 2013. Ms. Jordan, a graduate of the University of West Indies at Cave Hill, possesses both bachelor's and master's degrees from that institution. She brings to the role of president 35 years of pedagogical experience, having served as a teacher at both the primary and the secondary levels, and as a high school principal. She also presided over the Barbados Secondary Schools Athletic Championship Committee for 13 years. Apart from her AAB duties, our president serves as the chairperson of the Child Care Board of Barbados, as a member of the Board of Directors of the National Sports Council of Barbados, and as a member of the Administrative, General, and Professional Services Commission of the Ministry of the Public Service of Barbados. Ms. Jordan has been a sports administrator in the sports of netball, swimming, and now athletics. Her commitment and dedication to the development of the youth of our country is indisputable. Her attitude to assisting our youth can be summed up in just 2 words: yes and absolutely. Ms. Jordan will address you this evening on the topic track and field during COVID-19, and specifically on the issues of the administration and governance of the local sport. President Jordan, you have the floor.
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, all. This evening's Stakeholders Forum welcomes club and school administrators, coaches, officials, athletes, members of the media, parents, and other well-wishers. 17 March 2020 is a date that most athletes and coaches will probably never forget. It's the last day of knapsack, and it was the first day of the many announcements from the Minister of Health and Wellness, the Prime Minister, and other officials about the COVID-19 virus. The SAC finals, which were scheduled for the following 2 days, 18th and 19th, were not staged. The subsequent lockdown aimed at controlling the spread of the COVID-19 virus saw the temporary cessation of competitive sports, not only in Barbados, but all over the world. Of course, many athletes were disappointed, and they bemoaned the fact that opportunities like Carifta and Olympics, which they were relying on to give them exposure to move on to scholarships or to a professional career in athletics, were being deferred. Coaches did not see the results of their hard work, and we all were forced to adjust to our lifestyle, to what has become a new normal. When things looked like we were getting back to normal late last year in October, November, and December, the AAB endeavored to begin a preseason competition. This too had to be aborted because we were forced to pause again because of COVID-19. The AAB, like all other Barbadian entities, had no choice but to be guided by the Ministry of Health and Wellness and the national COVID-19 protocols which were enacted. This situation forced all of us to adapt, and I believe coaches adapted by giving their athletes individual workouts, and they found creative ways via the available technology to communicate with their charges. Government has recently relaxed the protocols, and the board has sought and was granted permission from the Attorney General to restart competitions. We welcome that, and we will proceed with caution and with much accountability. So, starting next month, we hope to present our usual high-level competitive opportunities for both our home-based senior athletes who are endeavoring to meet the Olympic standards, as well as the under-13 and under-20 athletes who hope to meet the regional and international competition standards for this season. In our previous webinars, we sought to offer education on COVID-19, which we felt was useful for any return to competition. We hope you availed yourself of those opportunities. If you didn't do this, this information is still available on the AAB's YouTube channel. This evening, we will continue the focus on the return to competition, being always mindful that the COVID-19 virus is still with us. So, this presentation makes the assumption that conditions related to COVID-19 will remain as they are now, or hopefully will improve. As a direct result of this, I will spend a few minutes discussing the concept of the COVID monitor in training and competition. In the request we made to the government for the return to competition, the board made some commitments which we will share with you now, and we will implore you to follow. Remember that failure to follow these may have a result which none of us want. The COVID monitor is an adult who will be designated by each club have direct responsibility for ensuring the enforcement of COVID-19 protocols during training. Each COVID monitor will be responsible for supervision in a ratio of 1 monitor to 12 athletes. This therefore requires you, coaches and clubs officials, to be creative in ensuring that your club continues its activity, but does not fall victim to the monitoring committees. This is the National Monitoring Committee vigilance. So you therefore need to decide how you will group your athletes at training to allow for the effective use of your monitors. You can decide whether you group by age, by event, or combination, or however you seek to. But remember, the ratio is 1 to 12, 1 monitor to 12 athletes. As I said before, the COVID-19 monitor at clubs is essential. It's also essential in competition, but we will come to that later. The AAB will honor its commitment to ensure that the local schedule takes place under conditions that promote compliance with the national COVID-19 protocols. So the COVID-19 monitors will then be expected to be on duty from the start of each meet. So clubs, you must take note, and I repeat, that the 1 to 12 ratio will be required in competitions also. Therefore, if you registered or if you send entries of 36 athletes, you must have by ratio 3 COVID monitors. I hope that we all understand that the success of the meets on the local schedule requires us all to be compliant. So the rules of engagement associated with the COVID-19 monitors will be forwarded to you from the office prior to the start of competitions. Kindly note that the consequences of non-compliance may include non-participation. I wish you to note that the contact list, the protocols for training and competition, and all the other related documents will be circulated from the office. Remember, this will only work with the cooperation of all. And you know the slogan in Barbados around COVID, we are all in this together. On the matter of spectators, kindly note that we will be forced to wait on the possible revision or update of the national protocols to determine whether or not we can have spectators. In the event that we cannot accommodate spectators, we have begun discussions with sport.bb in the hope that we can live stream the meets. These discussions are continuing. I need to make one important point about officials. This evening, first, let me take the opportunity to thank all our volunteer officials for their continued dedication in ensuring that these meets can be held. I will at this time appeal to clubs and parents to join this dedicated group of officials. We will need more assistance during this season because of the increased demands being made of us in ensuring adherence to the COVID protocols so we can remain open and hosting successful meets in these times. I will repeat, success or failure in hosting the 2021 competition season rests on all of us. On the question of funding, I know that athletes, parents, and coaches see participation in regional and international competitions as the ultimate goal for each season. The board of the AAB knows this and will give our best efforts to seek funding so we can participate in at least some, if not all, of the 2021 Overseas Championships and Games. I, however, want to caution that the financial and economic landscape in Barbados has also been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. We will, as usual, solicit the assistance of government, Olympic Association, and all other benefactors, including private sector, to assist in this venture. During the 2019 season, I promise you that the board will seek to move to an online registration system. The COVID-19 environment forced us to ensure the completion of this platform. Coaches, if you had the opportunity to check your correspondence, the one you received during the middle of this week, you would have noticed that you were invited to complete your individual online registration. We propose to send the online forms for the athletes sometime during next week. This process in itself is in the pilot phase, so we need you to ensure that the link is sent to the athletes. As I conclude, I know that this presentation probably did not capture all the administrative matters which are applicable to returning to competition. We will communicate all of the pertinent information from the office as we usually do. In the meantime, if there's a question that you think you must get answered this evening, I'll be willing to answer it as long as we have an answer. So this presentation this evening focused primarily on the adjustments which are to be made if these competitions are to go ahead and we are to be successful in returning to competition under the existing COVID-19 conditions. Feel free to communicate with us in the usual ways to seek answers to any additional matters that may be of particular interest to you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's it for me.
President Jordan, thank you very, very much for your submission. I now open the floor, as I said before, to anyone who wants to pose a question to, or even a comment to President Jordan. As I told you before, and I will repeat, you can interact with the panelists posing your question or comments by utilizing the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen, or posting your question or comment in the chat, another feature available at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Additionally, you can forward your questions and or comments via the chat feature if you're viewing via the YouTube platform. If you want to come in and interact, we encourage you, because there's still space available on the Zoom platform, we encourage you to sign in on Zoom. Are there any specific questions and or queries or comments directed for President Jordan? It would seem that President Jordan has connected very well with the audience. I see no questions. I see no questions being forwarded at this time for President Jordan. There is a question, President Jordan, coming from Dr. Adrian Lord. Will these club monitors be trained especially and specifically for their duties as COVID monitors?
If I may answer, Dr. Lord, we have sent the questions, well, we sent notification or a small survey or some information gathering to the clubs last week. We got the permission from the Attorney General last week. We sent out a questionnaire to ask the clubs to send us the names. We got some of them, most of them, but I don't think we had got the in the ratio of any more than one per club. So we're going to follow that up this week, and I am sure that we have the members of the medical commission who will help us to either put together further information, but we do have some documentation. But if you mean train as face-to-face or by Zoom, we didn't reach that far. We're now collating information. But if you think that we need to, if you want to make a recommendation for how rigorous you think that training could be, you could let us know. But that document I referred to as rules of engagement, that's the document that will inform our COVID monitors. And we are putting that together now. So by maybe the beginning, Monday, Tuesday, we'll have it all completed.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lord. Dr. Lord has sent his thanks to you, President Jordan. Madam President, there's another question. How will we police and ensure that the COVID monitors, one, enter the stadium and carry out their duties during the competition? How will that be policed?
So the structure that we are looking at does not only involve the club having monitors in the ratio of 1 to 12. The structure, it builds on that. There will be monitors of the monitors. And then we're going to use something like a protest forum where people, of course, we're not going to just say, hey, you're breaking the protocols, go. But we're going to have people who will assist us in ensuring and nudging those monitors to ensure that they're continually doing what they have to do. And failure to do that, there is a backup process that we have. I said earlier, we are at the mercy of the national COVID-19 monitoring team. And therefore, it is in our interest, the athletes' interest, the coaches' interest, the administrators' interest, to ensure that we do the right thing. But we have people too, so the system doesn't stop at the club monitor. It goes all the way up to the board. And there will be systems in place to ensure that people comply.
Thank you very much. I see the hand of Akila Jones up. Ms. Jones, go right ahead. Please ask your question.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My question was, how does monitoring pertain to independent athletes training within those facilities and competing, those persons outside the clubs?
If you are an adult and you want to be part of the process of ensuring that the competitions continue all through from the 1st to the 7th, because we are thinking of having 7 competitions between now and when we start to considering and selecting people. So if you are an adult and you come into the stadium and the notice is given always, we are being compliant with the COVID-19 national protocols. We're going to be hopeful that an individual would follow the protocols. If you are a child, I mean somebody under 18 years old. When I say child, that's what I mean. So an under 17 athlete, and we believe that that athlete needs some nudging. And you're an independent athlete. First of all, we do not take independent athletes under adult into the stadium. There's a form that we fill out, and if an athlete is a minor and she's in the stadium, she or he must be in the stadium with a coach or with an adult. So we have protocols in place even before COVID to ensure that under 18 athletes are monitored in the stadium. A parent can't just say, I am the mother of a 15-year-old child. I'm dropping him or her off for competition. That person will have filled out a form and is in the office that would say the coach is responsible for me and the coach's name is Matthew Luke. So I'm going to assume that the adult is the responsible adult, and I'm going to assume that the adult that is responsible for the child who has not reached the age of majority would be responsible for ensuring that those minors follow the rules.
Thank you very much, President Jordan, and thank you, Akila, for your question. I would hope, though, that everyone entering the stadium would understand that all of us are responsible for looking out for each other as we are competing. If you see someone not following the rules, see someone not following the protocols, I would expect that adults, athletes, coaches, officials, they would all seek to keep us competing and training in a safe environment. I thank you. That was, thank you, and Akila Jones has sent her thanks. We want to move on now, though, however, to the second section of our webinar this evening, preparations and protocols for the Carifta Games 2021. As a junior athlete, Donna Rayner represented Bermuda in multiple Carifta Games, in CAC Games and CSC Championships and Pan American Games. She also came very close to qualifying for the Olympic Games in Seoul, Korea in 1988. Mrs. Rayner attended Jackson State University in the United States on an athletic scholarship and served in both her junior and senior years as captain of the university's track and field team. Donna graduated from Jackson State with the Bachelor of Science degree with honors in computer science with a minor in mathematics. She retired from competitive athletics in 2001 and started the Flyers Track Club, which she coached for several years. In 2010, Donna was elected president of the Bermuda National Athletics Association, a position that she still holds today. She's also served on the Council of the North American, Central American, and Caribbean Confederation, the hemispheric governing body of track and field. Mrs. Rayner is a recipient of the Queen's Certificate of Honor, a national award which she won and received in 2010. Donna managed Bermuda's national athletics team to both the London and the Rio Olympics, and she is currently a member of the Bermuda Olympic Association's Board of Directors. She's the chairperson of the Women in Sports Committee for the Bermuda Olympic Association, chairperson of the NACAC Gender Leadership Working Group Committee, and a member of the Development Commission of World Athletics. In her capacity as chairperson of the 2021 Carifta Games, she's with us this evening to share Bermuda's plans and protocols for hosting the Carifta Games in an environment where the COVID-19 pandemic continues to be a serious challenge. Mrs. Rayner, you have the floor.
Good evening and greetings from Bermuda. A quick update on the preparations. As you're aware, we were 3 weeks away from Carifta Games taking place, so we were close to ready. The games were scheduled for 2020, and with the COVID pandemic, we had to postpone those games. And the dates that we set were for April the 3rd to the 5th, 2021. As the date was drawing near, we began to feel that we still did not have a handle on the pandemic. So we contacted the NACAC executive and advised our feelings. With the agreement of the majority of the Carifta countries, there was an agreement to move the date to July the 3rd to the 5th. Only recently, we learned that the Caribbean CXC exams were moved from June 14th to July 13th to 16th, which again caused us to find another date for the games. Reviewing the NACAC and the World Athletic calendar, we have now agreed on the dates August 13th to the 15th. We are looking at this as a positive, as this gives us more time and hopefully we have a better handle on COVID. And I think the vaccine is going to play a crucial part as well. The main areas we will now need to focus on is accommodation, transportation, and of course the medical areas of the game. Fortunately, we are close to finalizing the hotels and are in current conversation with the transportation company, who we were talking to prior to the postponement. We are looking to host a very safe event with all precautions in place. We have prepared a COVID protocol document that we have created with the assistance from our government. When I thought of this presentation, my thought process was, if I was a parent or a coach, what information would I want to know if my child or athlete was traveling to another country to compete during a pandemic, COVID pandemic? Remember this, all that I'm going to tell you from now on is pertaining to if we had to host Carifta today or next week, this is what will be in place. As we know, this can change daily, and I could tell you we've had some changes in Bermuda just today where they've changed the date, the times. They've also changed a number of persons that can be together because our COVID numbers have increased over the last week. So again, we've had changes. So the document that we've produced, the COVID protocol document, is an ever living and changing document. But as of today, this is where we sit. The first question, what do I need to do prior to arrival in Bermuda? All visitors, delegates, which includes athletes, officials, and guests, will be required to have taken a COVID PCR test 3 days before arrival in Bermuda. A negative result has to be presented on arrival at the airport, or you will not be allowed to enter the country. As far as vaccinations are concerned, the government is advising persons to get the vaccination, but is not mandatory. In Bermuda, we currently have Pfizer, which is 2 doses within 2 weeks. At this point in time, the government is suggesting teams arrive no less than 3 days before competitions. So for Carifta, that will be Tuesday, August the 11th. But again, that is as of today. I still have to have some discussions with government regarding that. During travel, precautions, mask wearing in public places, avoid food, drink consumption, or any activity that will require removing masks during travel. All athletes will need to be signed online prior to competition based on the deadline, and numbers will be assigned during that period. These will be collected by the identified team officials, and I'll talk about that a little bit further. During these Carifta games, the role of the team manager is going to be very critical for these games, as all athletes and officials will remain in a bubble from the time they arrive on the island until they leave, and the team manager will need to ensure compliance. On arrival in Bermuda, all persons must wear masks at all times. All persons, including vaccinated persons, will get a test upon arrival in Bermuda, and it's a nasopharyngeal administered by the government, and must quarantine in the room until negative test is received. Once received, if negative, they are free to leave their rooms, but cannot congregate in places with persons and must maintain physical distance from others. The results in Bermuda are normally received the same day or early the next day. So the results do not take long to come back in Bermuda. If results are positive, the person will have to quarantine for 14 days in a separate room accommodation. If it's an athlete, a team manager or official will have to remain with the athlete. Contact tracing will then take place, and all identified close contacts will also have to quarantine for 14 days. The cost of this is still under discussion as to who picks up the cost. That could be ourselves as the LOC. This might be something that we work out with NACAC. Hopefully, and I'm pretty sure that cost will not go on the country or the athlete or the official, but we have to confirm those details. So I can't say today what exactly that will be, but it definitely probably will not be on the country or the athlete or official. The same will be for persons who arrive in Bermuda via charter or via regular flights, because we do have some people that are looking to come on charters, and we do have some countries that will be coming on regular air flights. The athletes and officials with masks will be transported to the hotels in designated buses assigned specifically for the games. Those buses will be cleaned and disinfected on a daily basis. Based on arrivals, the athletes' officials will travel in buses according to the group they arrived in. For example, if a group comes in on a charter, that group will stay together in the transportation. If athletes come on a regular flight, they will then be put on a different bus from the athletes that come in on the charter. And all of this will be until the test results come back and we get the test results that the athletes are negative. The accommodations. Athletes and officials at this point in time will be housed at the Grotto Bay Hotel, which is less than a mile from the airport and approximately a 30-minute drive to the competition stadium. VIPs can be housed at the Hamilton Princess Hotel. And we're looking to have a hotel specifically for the media, which is at Cocoa Reef. So we're working with Cocoa Reef at this moment to secure the cost and so on and so forth. And we also have a media person in Bermuda who is corresponding with the media in the Caribbean to advise them of hotel, transportation, and so on and so forth. Athletes, including their numbers, and officials' accreditation packs will be ready for collection at the hotel, and they will be collected by the team manager only and distributed to the athletes and the officials. There will be a separate dining area from other guests in the hotel for the athletes and officials. Countries at this point in time will have assigned times for dining. Security will be stationed throughout the hotel to make sure that everyone adheres to the guidelines. Additional masks will be available at the hotel and at the stadium in case an athlete or an official misplaces their mask. We will have masks on hand at the stadium. Throughout the competition, a medical team will be assigned throughout the competition. Daily PCR tests will be administered to all athletes every evening before competition. I spoke with our permanent secretary on Friday because I asked her about vaccinations, because in Bermuda, the age group is 18 and above. And I know in some islands, the age group for vaccinations is 16 and above. My question was, if we have athletes that have been vaccinated, do they still have to do the daily test? And her answer was, at this point in time, yes. So all athletes, whether vaccinated or not, will have to have that daily PCR test, which, as I said, we have suggested to them that those tests should be in the evenings so that we get the results back and the athletes then will be able to compete early in the morning, because I advised them that our competitions start early in the morning and usually go throughout the day. So we can have athletes tested in the morning while we sit and wait for results. So we have proposed that our testing take place in the evenings. These tests are self-administered and will be given to the team manager to organize their team testing and return to the medical staff at a specific time. So all of that will be laid out for the team manager. The results will be returned by the end of the day. So basically, we will have those results back before start of competition in the morning. The same process and procedures will be followed if a negative result is returned and that athlete is free to compete. If a positive result is returned, once again, that athlete will have to be quarantined and contact tracing will begin. There will be temperature checks prior to leaving the hotel for competition, and the athlete will not be allowed on the bus if their temperature is above normal. At this point in time, only athletes who are competing will be allowed at the stadium. Security will be throughout the stadium again, plus we will have volunteers stationed at various points throughout the National Sports Center, basically advising and making sure that people follow the rules that are put in place. Broadcasted messages of guidelines will be announced throughout the games. Signs will be posted throughout the event. There will be designated seating for athletes separate from spectators, if spectators are allowed. Event guidelines. All events will follow the World Athletic and NACAC COVID event guidelines. For example, starting blocks will be clean prior to each race. High jump beds clean between each competitor. Competitors to wear masks. So basically, in our protocol document, we have set out for each individual event what will be expected of each event. There will be no opening or closing ceremony. and we are reviewing the process for the award ceremony at the moment. So that award ceremony will not be as normal where the athletes are given their medals. What we're looking at is possibly having a table or something set up prior to the medal ceremony where the athlete will pick up their own medal, but we will still have them on the podium. We will present the winners of each of the events. Again, at this point in time in Bermuda, as far as spectators go, if we were to have the games tomorrow or next week, there will be no spectators allowed. Again, in August, this could be different. But what the government has stated to us is if we do allow spectators, vaccination requirement is recommended. Again, not mandatory. Physical distancing will be adhered to, which fortunately, the way that our stadium is set up, we can set up seating where physical distancing will be allowed. And spectators must wear masks. Because of the uncertainty of spectators, we will make sure that these games will be able to be viewed online. So we're working on that to make sure that the quality of the games being viewed is first class. We recognize that this is not going to be an easy task. We have several hurdles that we have to overcome. But I am confident in my team. I am confident in NACAC. I'm confident in World Athletics that we will all work together and we will give 100% to make this happen. Of course, unless COVID is not on our side. Thank you, Chairperson.
Mrs. Rayner, thank you very, very much for your very comprehensive presentation. The floor is open, obviously, for questions now to Mrs. Rayner. But let me start. The first question, Mrs. Rayner, that came to us was from Cheryl Dean. And the question was, will any considerations be given to those athletes who would have been in their final year last year and who would have qualified? There's a similar question that says, has any consideration been given to move the category for CARIFTA up to under 21 rather than under 20 to accommodate those folks who would have lost last year?
Well, I'm going to answer this question like this. We were in a predicament as well, and that was a question that I put to the president and the general secretary as soon as we talked about the postponement, because no, you know how competitive we are, and we felt that we had, a female that would have really wiped up in the 3,000. So that was my first question, and she aged out. I think after much discussion, it was agreed that we will leave the ages as they are. When we sent out the survey, basically all of the countries agreed that CARIFTA will stay as it is. So unfortunately, the persons that aged out, we do have, no, I don't even think they're eligible for World Under 20, but we do have Pan Am Under 23 in September. So I guess we'll prepare our athletes for that. But unfortunately, it was agreed that we would leave it. I mean, number one, it's going to be difficult as it is to host these games in a COVID pandemic, trying to add in another age group, which would mean more athletes. That in itself, I think for this year, probably wouldn't be a good time to do something like that.
Okay. Another question is, for those persons who are already vaccinated and who would have received 2 doses of any vaccine, are they being subjected to daily testing as well once they come into your country, to your jurisdiction?
The athletes, yes, but not if you're coming in as a spectator, you're coming in as a guest. Basically, you have the first test on arrival. If that test is negative, then you're free to move around the island if you have been vaccinated. But of course, you have to wait for your test results. So vaccinated people will probably fare better coming to Bermuda. As I said, our government is really pushing vaccinations, but they're not making it mandatory at this point in time.
Okay. Do you feel comfortable with athletes administering their own test the nasopharyngeal test every day? Do you feel comfortable with athletes being committed to doing so?
That was the reason that I said, I think the role of the team manager for these Carifta Games is going to be very critical, because, and I'm in total agreement. And that's why in my presentation, I stated that when these team managers receive these PCR tests, the managers need to give those tests to the athletes, but the manager needs to be there. For example, we will have several rooms in the hotels, so maybe those managers can take that team into one of those rooms and assist with the administration of these tests. So no, I'm in total agreement. We're talking about athletes who are 14 to 19. You know, they play. Somebody could give their cup to somebody else and so on and so forth. So no, I definitely think this needs to be directed by the team manager or team official or coach to assist these athletes with these tests. No, definitely, I agree. They should not be left on their own to administer the test.
Okay, Mrs. Renner, thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
Very comprehensive and very informative. We
Thank
want to
you.
move on to our third segment at this time. That is the AAB's 2021 competition schedule and its implications for all stakeholders. Mrs. Esther Maynard presently serves as the Public Relations Officer of the Athletics Association of Barbados. Mrs. Maynard is the association's technical director. She also chairs the technical committee of the body. Esther Maynard has served athletics in Barbados for almost 50 years, having been elected to the council of the then Amateur Athletic Association of Barbados in 1974 as assistant secretary. Mrs. Maynard has also served as secretary, assistant treasurer, and has occupied the positions of first vice president and president. She has held each of those positions on 2 separate occasions. Mrs. Maynard is an educator by profession, having served as head of the physical education department of the Barbados Community College for over 20 years. She has been a high school teacher and a lecturer for both World Athletics and the International Olympic Committee's Solidarity Sports Administration program. Esther Maynard has also served the Olympic movement, having been elected as a member of the Council of the Barbados Olympic Association for almost 40 years, from 1982 to 2019. This tireless sports administrator has been chef de mission, general manager, and female manager of numerous national teams at the CAC, Pan American, Commonwealth, and Olympic Games. Her technical experience and expertise set her apart from any other track and field technical exponent in the region, having served as a technical official and technical delegate at numerous international and regional track and field competitions. Mrs. Maynard is a recipient of numerous national and international awards. In 2000, Mrs. Maynard received the Barbados Service Star, and in 2013, she received the World Athletics Plaque of Merit. Mrs. Maynard will address you this evening on the AAB's 2021 competition schedule and its implications for all stakeholders. Mrs. Maynard, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Good evening to all of our AA family and supporters who've joined us for this stakeholders webinar. It is my job this evening on behalf of the technical committee and the board of the Athletics Association to present the 2021 season, or I should say the resume season. You would have heard why we had to terminate competition at the end of December, but we've been behind the scenes planning for the last 6 months to ensure that when we were given the go ahead, that we would be ready to start this competition. With the outbreak of COVID, we were shut down in January, but we've just been given the go ahead to start training and competition. And as a result of this, we will resume competition in April. When we look at competition, we have to look at other things besides just the competition. I know that one of the things that is paramount is the facilities. We can guarantee you that our competitions in 2021 will be held on synthetic surfaces. So as I said, we are going to compete on synthetic surfaces. And I will add that if we are at the Usain Bolt, we will need to do the long throws, the javelin, and the discus separately. Currently, our competition caters for athletes under 15 and upwards in age. We took the fairly hard decision not to include the under 13s because there were several reasons that advised us against this. We wanted to reduce the numbers of athletes gathered at any one time for a competition, and also to shorten the length of the competition. And we know that minors under 13 years old need more supervision than the older athletes. And if we had those included, we would need a lot more technical officials in order to run our competitions. So now what we have come up with is a competition schedule that starts on April 24th and finishes on July 24th. The April 24th date was agreed on because we know from coaching theory that we need 4 to 8 weeks for an athlete to get back into shape to start competing. So that was the basis for starting our competition on the 24th of April. We will now look at the actual events within the competition schedule. On April 24th, we start with what we refer to as meet number 1, where we're going to have time finals. This format is also repeated on the 15th and the 16th of May, where again we have time finals. But from May 29th to 30th, we are going to go back to the usual format of prelims and finals. June 12th and 13th will see this also happening. With the exception of nationals, all of our competitions are going to be 2-day competitions. The nationals, which is also directed and dictated by what happens within the international calendar and agreed with the World Athletics, will be from the 25th to the 27th, which is the normal 3-day format, with a Friday evening designated to the preliminaries in a limited number of events, and then the next 2 days follow the normal format. Why we start on the Friday is to separate particularly the prelims and the finals of the 100 and the 400 hurdles, and also gives us room so that if we have large numbers in the 100 meters, particularly the men, that we can have 3 days to facilitate that. This year we'll see competition going beyond nationals. So there are 2 meets scheduled after our national championships. That is July 10th, the 11th, and July 24th, the 25th, which will follow the schedule of prelims and finals. This gives athletes who are competing late in the season more preparation time, and it also is a benefit for the training and competing for those who are competing in July and early July and mid-July, because some of our competitions go right down into September. When we looked at the other things that would impact on our competition, we know, and there's a lot has been said about the protocols that are necessary, and Dr. Harper is going to talk in more detail about those protocols, but there are specific things that we still need to address to ensure that we have a safe environment. And we look at particularly the procedures in the call room, where we want to limit the number of people in the call room at any one time. So our procedures in there will be slightly different. This will be set out in more detail as we get later and nearer to competition. Because of the situation, because we don't know exactly what it will be, we are planning that we would use limited lanes unless we have a better clearance and control over the COVID. But these decisions will be taken nearer to the time of competition, but it is a serious competition consideration. This also will be impacted on the number of heats that we have, because if we do not use all lanes, or we use 4 out of 8 lanes, it means that we will be virtually multiplying the number of heats. So those are the type of, some of the considerations that are going to be very, very important. And as Ms. Jordan alluded to and made it very clear, we are going to have extra people monitoring what is happening at all stages of the competition. Implements are another very important area where the sanitizing of implements, and Donna would have talked a lot about this, and we are really following the same protocols of ensuring that throwing implements are sanitized before they're actually used by athletes. They're sanitized after each throw by each athlete, and then again sanitized at the end of it to ensure that they are kept clean and free of any possible type of infection that could happen. These protocols will also be applied to things like the hurdles and the starting blocks, which is not an implement, but is a piece of equipment that is in general use and therefore will have to be cleaned before any athlete uses it. And also when that athlete finishes, so it can be passed on or used by the next athlete and is in a state of being sanitized properly. The high jump landing area is another area that, while it is not an implement, is very, very important, because people's bodies come in contact with the landing area, and we will have to ensure that it is sanitized before each use and in between uses, and also the crossbar. If it is touched by an athlete, it means that that will have to be sanitized. If the athlete clears it without touching it in any way, we wouldn't have to sanitize. But once the crossbar is touched by an athlete, it has to be sanitized before the next athlete can have their trial. Another serious consideration is the sea times. It is very, very important that clubs, schools, and coaches understand that it will be required that they provide sea times when submitting their entries. Failure to do that disadvantages their own athletes, because they would not be placed in the appropriate heat or in the appropriate lane. So it is important that from the beginning, we've been trying to get this implemented, but this is a time now where it is even more crucial because of the situation of dealing with COVID. Our competitions are held under technical regulations, and we will ensure that we bring all of these regulations up to date, up to speed, so that we start with the set of rules, regulations, and protocols that are mandatory and necessary for us to have competitions. And we will also ensure that over the period of time that any changes to these protocols or regulations are communicated to all of our stakeholders, so that there is no surprise or unawareness of when things change. We will keep reinforcing things of this nature to ensure that we have all of the rules and regulations for the safety and the validity of the competition put in place. I don't know if we can have the slide up that will look at the competitions, international competitions that we are going to be having. There we go, thank you. We start the competition in July. Normally, what would have happened would have been Carifta around April, but our first competition internationally is July 9th to 11th, which is an under 18 and under 23 NACA championships. And the current location for that could either be Grenada or Jamaica. That has not yet been decided by NACA. From there, we move on to the Pan Am Junior Championships, which will be held July 16th to 18th in Chile. The Olympic Games, as it were, divides the season in two competitively, in that July 30th to August 8th, we'll see the Tokyo Olympics, track and field section of it. After the Olympics, we have Carifta in its new date of 13th to 15th August. And as Donna pointed out, that will take place in Bermuda. And it's a big undertaking, both for them and all the countries concerned. And the final competition internationally is the Pan American Under-23 Games. This is a new concept. This being held for the first time under the auspices of the Pan American Sports Organization, and that is going to be held in Cali, Colombia. As our president said, we need everybody to make the season successful for all of us, and therefore we want to make sure that everything that we want done is done efficiently, and to protect the safe and ensure that all of our athletes are safe throughout the season. Thank you.
Mrs. Maynard, thank you very, very much. The floor is now open for any questions and or comments for Mrs. Maynard. Let me start with the first question I see here. Are athletes, Mrs. Maynard, bound, overseas-based athletes, that is, bound to come home to compete in the national championship to qualify for these overseas engagements?
My comment on that really does not pertain to the technical aspects of running meets. That is what the technical committee is responsible for. That question would be more towards the board and not the technical committee, because we deal with technical aspects of competition and not with eligibility and anything to do with that.
Okay. Is there anyone else that has a question? Any other questions for the technical committee?
No, don't let me leave that out there. We might not get a chance to come back to it. We started as a board mulling over that question, but we thought that we will give it some more time, follow COVID, and we'll make a decision on that and communicate it to you a little later. But we're gonna follow up this COVID thing, and possibly, because Nationals is now June, the last weekend in June, and we will certainly have an answer to that long before. I know you have your schedules, overseas-based athletes, but it would make sense to keep it in your schedule unless you're told otherwise.
Mrs. Maynard, thank you, President Jordan. Mrs. Maynard, there's another question. The issue of these implements and how do you ensure that these implements are sanitized, does that also relate to, you said about the landing beds, does that relate to the sand and the sand for jumping and to hurdles?
Yes, we did say that it would be for hurdles and starting blocks as well. But what has happened, or the information that has been forthcoming, is that there has been no evidence to show that you can pick up the virus in the sand, unless somebody did something really unethical like spitting. So I might add here that spitting will not be allowed in any form within the arena. But there's been no medical evidence to say that you catch it from landing in the sandpit.
And finally, will you have officials specifically assigned to dealing with these issues of sanitizing implements and the landing bed, etc.?
Yes, those will have to be another layer of officialdom. And these, that is why Ms. Jordan too was calling for more officials to assist us in the technical area, because that it is going to be very, very important to ensure that we, as organizers, make the environment safe for the athlete. So those things have to be monitored by our technical officials.
And finally, Mrs. Maynard, one of the questions is, the Athletics Association has always struggled with getting the number of officials necessary to run a track meet effectively, and has always struggled with this issue. How can we assure our athletes that during a COVID-19 situation that we will have that critical mass of officials that can actively and effectively and efficiently handle an entire track and field meet?
We have always had in the Athletics Association an ongoing technical officials training. Fortunately, we have our own certified IAA World Athletics trainer. So it is not that we have to wait for these things to happen. We do them almost every year at different levels, from the preliminary level right through to the level 1. So we have discussed this, and some of the things can also be done virtually. Now that we've had a pilot with NACA where it was done virtually, and then it would limit the necessary time for face-to-face instruction. So I'm sure that we can manage to do that, particularly if we are asking clubs and schools now to provide us with people to work in the technical area. We have enough expertise to be able to train them.
Thank you, Ms. Mena. The questions are coming fast and furious for you, Mrs. Mena, but I'm going to just take one more before we move on to the next section. We can always come back at the end of the presentations, take these questions. As there's no competition for under 13s this year, does that mean that there's no junior NACA competitions this season?
That is something, again, that is going to, I would defer to the board, because we are in a changing situation. We have to start with a plan, but it doesn't mean that we have to stick rigidly to it. If things improve, then we can look to see what else could be included. But to roll out with such a large number of athletes would be a challenge. So it's better to get this aspect of the under 15 up to seniors going, and then begin to look at other areas like that.
Okay, Mrs. Maynard, thank you very, very much for your explanations and for your comprehensive presentation. We'll move on now to the fourth presentation this evening, training and competing in the COVID-19 environment. Mario Burke is a 24-year-old Barbadian professional sprinter who is sponsored by Nike and Red Bull. Mario has won numerous medals for Barbados and is a multiple gold medal winner at the Carifta Games. He's also a World Junior Championships bronze medalist in the 100 meters. Mario was also a member of the Barbados 4x100 meter relay team that won the silver medal at the World Relays in 2017. In 2015, Mario was awarded an athletic scholarship to the University of Houston. In 2019, he graduated from that institution with a bachelor's degree in business administration, majoring in management. He successfully represented the university in both indoor and outdoor competitions, winning the silver medal in the NCAA Indoor Championship in 2019. He has also won back-to-back NCAA titles in the 4x100 meter relay in the years 2017 and 2018. Mario is a multiple times American Athletic Conference champion and a 10-time first-team NCAA All-American. In 2019, Mario became only the second Barbadian after Obadeli Thompson to break the 10-second barrier in the 100 meters, recording 9.98 at the NCAA Track and Field Championships. He is currently the 3-time defending national champion of Barbados in the 100 meters. Mario will address you this evening on training and competing in the COVID-19 environment. Mr. Burke, you have the floor.
Well, to begin, I'd like to say good night to everyone here on the Zoom, as well as everyone watching it on YouTube. Hope everyone is staying safe, doing well, as we continue to fight off the pandemic in Barbados and prepare to return for the track and field in Barbados. I know everybody is eagerly anticipating it, excited to come back. I am as well, and I believe it can be done. You know, it's going to take a lot of strategic planning, discipline, and sacrifice, but I believe you're on the right tracks. As mentioned, I'm here tonight to talk about my personal experiences dealing with COVID-19 as it relates to competition protocols and training protocols. For me, being based in Houston, Texas, the pandemic really hit hard around March 2020 last year. At that point, I was getting ready for my outdoor season and training was going really well. I was getting into a decent groove of things. I was confident that how the season was going to go. And then at that point in time too, that was when all the dominoes started to fall. Different sporting leagues postponed their seasons. NCAA canceled the collegiate season, NBA season got canceled and stuff like that. So, you know, it's really a bummer. And for me personally, universities and campuses across the country was getting closed. And for me, I still train at university that I attended. So if the university being shut down, the track there by extension was closed as well. So it became difficult for me to find a place to train. And at that point too, the pandemic was really rampant in Houston. So we couldn't meet up face to face to have any workouts. And at that point in time, my coach came up with an idea for me to go to some parks and some hills around the area, you know, to get some conditioning working, just to stay in shape. Because as mentioned, a lot of meets that I was supposed to run out were canceled. So it didn't really have no outlook of when the season was about to start. So he just wanted me to stay in shape just in case anything pops on the horizon. Luckily for me, I have some fellow Barbadian athletes that also train in Houston as well as my post-collegiate group that I train with. So we basically were on our own for a few weeks, just knocking that out. And at that point in time, it took a lot of discipline and I really had to buckle down and hold myself accountable to certain things. And in that period of time is really, really matured as an athlete on and off the track, and mentally as well as physically. I wanted to keep the same drive, the same intensity, the same focus that I had in those training sessions that I would have if I had a track meet coming up next week or in weeks coming up. But then about June 2020, that's when we got some word that the season was about to pick back up. I had some meets coming up in the United States in the end of July, as well as the European season that was about to kickstart in the start of August. I was going through to September. At that point too, the university was still closed, so I didn't have the track to train. But luckily, my coach worked out something where I could use a high school track to get some work in. And we didn't get to use the track every day. We didn't get to meet up face to face every day, but I still put in some decent enough work to get myself in some shape to compete. And those meets it began in the end of July, and it was a series of 3 meets in a city named Prairie View. Luckily for me, it was about 45 minutes from Houston, so it was a quick, easy drive there to compete. And protocols for that were pretty standard, strict but standard. Of course, there were no fans there. We had to have the negative PCR testing done no more than 72 hours prior to the test. And when the results came out, we had to submit that via email to the meet organizers, as well as to bring a physical hard copy to enter the facility. In addition to that, we had to fill out health waiver forms that basically ask questions like if you've been in contact with anyone who had the virus within the last 2 weeks, if you been outside of the country within the last 2 weeks, and just basic questions about your overall health and your well-being. In addition to that as well, there were multiple temperature checks being done at the facility, not just when you enter, but they had a system in place where after a certain amount of events, everyone from athletes, coaches to officials, we all had to leave the facility and re-enter to undergo temperature checks. And for every given meet, probably like 3 or 4 temperature checks that took place on any given day. Moving on from that, as I went over to Europe, I went over there for roughly about 6 weeks for competitions. And to even be accepted in the country, you had to have authorization forms given to us by the meet organizers of those specific meets. And those had to be approved by the government of those countries, basically outlining why you're here. So like, for example, it was saying like Mario Burke is entering the country for this Diamond League meet on August 17th. He's arriving on the 14th and he'll be here through the 19th, staying at whatever hotel it was, and basically saying what competition you're coming at. And in addition to that, also you had to have the PCR testing done. And the negative, you have to have it negative and to even show it at the immigration to get past that. And then when you pass that as well, even sometimes when you get to the hotel, there was rapid testing being done for you to even get access to your room keys and to get access to the dining halls. And for most of these meets that I went to, you didn't get to really explore the hotels or stuff like that. It was basically dining room, track, and stuff like that. I was staying at some really nice hotels, but I didn't really get to experience it. And some meets were more strict than others. Some allow for more freedom than others. It just basically off of the nature of the situation near those specific countries. But for me personally, I just wanted to stick to my routine, because the last thing I wanted is to be in a country, like for example, like Italy. Their rules were less strict. There was a lot for freedom, but I didn't want to go outside and get involved in going to the mall, going shopping, doing tourist stuff. And then say I go to the next meet and then contract the virus when I was in Italy, and then go over there and have to be in a situation where I have to quarantine in a foreign European country for 2 weeks. And that was the last thing I wanted. And then for meets like Sweden, for example, it was a Diamond League meet there that I went to. And they were really on top of the game. They tried to limit as much people in the facilities as much as possible. So if a competition, say you compete in the 400 meters, but your event is at 6 o'clock. Normally, some people like to come to the track like three hours before, or whatever the case may be, to get accustomed to the atmosphere and settle in. But for that meet, you had to travel with your event group to the track. So it was basically like 2-hour windows. So you leave like 2 hours before the meet, their event kicks off. And then even after you're finished competing, you couldn't stay for the meet. You had to be directed back to the hotel. So it was basically like an in and out situation. For most of the meets I went to as well, the trainings to prepare for those meets was based on slots. And it began from like 9 in the morning all the way down to the evening times. And each time slot had like a limited amount, like probably like 10 slots per session, per time session. And yeah, basically I had to go downstairs in the lobby, fill out your name to a certain time. And that's when you would go to the track to train and stuff like that. And for a meet in like Doha, Qatar, they was really strict as well, because even though I came from another meet where I had a PCR test done at that meet, I came to Doha, but you couldn't leave the airport itself without getting another test done. And that process was really long, because I remember getting there at like 11 o'clock at night, and then ended up leaving in the airport to like 4 in the morning. I had to run like 2 days after that, and they couldn't leave the hotel room after you get back the results and situations like that. And then it didn't allow for roaming, just track, hotel, dining room, and that was about it. And for that meet too, it had specific wristbands. So for example, if you had a red wristband, that was the time that you were allowed to go to breakfast between like 8 and 9. And those were yellow wristbands, so go to breakfast between 9 and 10. And situations like that transpire for breakfast, lunch, as well as dinner. And they were just doing the most that they can to minimize the gathering of people as much as they could. And fast forward to this season now, luckily the university I train at is opened again, getting to use the facilities. But the protocols for that is that you have to be tested every 2 weeks in order to access the facility. And if anyone, for example, was to miss a test, you can't come into the facility. They won't allow you in until you get your own personal testing, or unless you wait to an extra 2 weeks for the next round of testing that was taking place. And that's when it really comes down to the individual discipline, because in Houston, everything is pretty much open and free for everyone. So if I want to go to the club tonight, I could probably go there right now. But for me, I'd rather just stay away from certain like situations like that, because I don't want to be, last thing I want in a year like this is to be in a situation where I have to miss out on training, I miss out on competition just because I was irresponsible in my own life and things like that. So I still try to stay as socially distanced as I can and stay away from certain activities to make sure that, I don't miss out on training and competition. So that's about it that I can offer from my end.
Mr. Burke, thank you very much. Mario, brilliant. Thank you. They have the people like they want to ask you some questions there very quickly. They're not even waiting. Someone here has asked, have you had the vaccine? And if you have not, do you intend to take it?
I haven't had it as yet, but I'm looking into it. I'm open to taking the vaccine.
Okay, open to taking the vaccine. There's another question for you that states, has all these protocols and restrictions, do you believe it has in any way affected your indoor performance? Because Barbadians saw you competing indoors. Do you think it had any negative effect on your performance?
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that at all. For me, I didn't personally think that I performed as good as I wanted, but my coach and I we sat down before the season and said that we training for outdoor season instead of indoors. So I was using those couple meets that I ran indoors as a training session to build a platform to open my outdoor season. So I wouldn't really say, the protocols are a lot, to be honest. It's a lot you have to go through, and it's mentally and tiring and taxing, but I don't really want to sit here and say that that's the reason why, you know, that I didn't perform as good as I wanted.
Okay. There is a question here from a gentleman that everyone should know, Obadeli Thompson. This question is directed to Mario. You're used to competing under certain conditions. Any tips do you have to provide for any of our athletes for staying focused and calm when training or competing under these very invasive and or frustrating protocols? Are there any tips that you can offer anyone?
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say is to always just believe in yourself, believe in the training that you put in. Anything like that, and the protocols and things like that, those are external factors. At the end of the day, when you come on the track, the only thing that matters is you and what you and your coach put in. So shouldn't really let things like that get in the way. It's just about staying as calm, as he said, staying as calm as possible, believing in yourself and trusting the training that you put in. So that's what I try. I mean, for me, I'm still learning to do all these things to block out all outside factors, but believing I'm getting better. That's as much as I can say. Just trust in the process and be confident in what you're doing.
Thank you, Mario. We need to move on, but Mario, thank you very, very much for your very informative presentation this evening and for representing our athletes in such a big way. Thank you very, very much. We need to move on to our final presentation for the evening. That presentation is going to be on the issue of health protocols for training and competition. Health protocols for training and competing. Dr. Llewellyn Harper received his Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery, MBBS degree from the University of the West Indies at Mona, Jamaica. He received his Master of Science degree in Sports Medicine from the University of London in the United Kingdom. Dr. Harper is currently in private sports and primary care medicine practice. Dr. Harper is also a serious administrator. He serves as the chairman of the Medical Commission for the North America and Caribbean Handball Confederation, and he's a member of the Medical Commission for the International Handball Federation. He also gives sports medicine support to the sports of netball, track and field, football, volleyball, and to cricket. Dr. Harper has served as team physician for several sports at major games, including the Pan American Games, the Netball World Championships, and the Commonwealth Games. He was the team doctor for the Barbados team at the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney, Australia. Dr. Harper also presently serves as president of the Handball Association of Barbados. He will address you this evening on health protocols for training and competition. No stranger to us in track and field. Dr. Harper, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. Good evening, Zoomers and Tubers. Thanks for the opportunity to address this very knowledgeable audience. I'm going to elaborate on the return to training protocols that our President, Jordan, alluded to, and some of what was addressed by Mrs. Maynard with a more health slant, more medical slant. The return to training protocol is a comprehensive document. The protocol, which is delivered and put out by the Athletics Association of Barbados, is a comprehensive document, but an evolving one. And it will almost have a life of its own because COVID-19 protocols change almost daily. It's not really possible to cover the entire document in this presentation. Please note that the Athletic Association of Barbados, to its eternal credit, is committed to the health and safety of its athletes, coaches, and members specifically, but also to the public of Barbados in general. Note also that the government of Barbados regulations should always be adhered to when returning to any form of training, and it's the responsibility of all members, affiliates, athletes, and coaches to abide by these policies and procedures designated to ensure a safe environment for all. As long as the virus continues to circulate in our communities, it's going to be impossible to completely eliminate the risk. So adherence to the protocol is very necessary. Taking this into consideration, every stakeholder of the AAB, athlete, coach, parent, sporting body, must make their own decision as to whether it is in their best interest to resume participation. Understand, every stakeholder must make their own decision about whether they want to go back into return to sport or not in their best interest. And no penalty should be attached or sanction levied on those wary of return to training. We've already addressed mental fortitude and fragility in earlier topics in our webinars. For the return to training protocols to be effective and successful, full cooperation from all stakeholders, therefore, is required. The basis for success relies on no stakeholder with symptoms attending practice or competition, even as a spectator, a strictly enhanced and applied level of sanitization for facilities and equipment being implemented, and the fact that all participants practicing and encouraging good hygiene. This perhaps is the most important. Participants must practice and encourage others to practice good hygiene. So there's a responsibility which we must all assume. This significant responsibility should include the fact that the following persons should not attend a training facility for any reason. Any person experiencing any symptoms of COVID-19, and this goes without saying. If symptoms occur while at training, and in this case, the individual must immediately inform the coach and compliance manager. The phrase I think that the president used was compliance monitor, so let's use that. So if any symptoms occur, they must immediately inform the coach and compliance monitor, then leave immediately the coach. His responsibility is to reiterate to the athlete the need for them to contact their physician or the COVID-19 hotline as soon as is practicable. Any person who lives in a home or has been in quarantine or close contact with someone who has COVID-19 symptoms should also not attend a training facility. Anyone who has been a contact, primary or secondary, or someone diagnosed with COVID, and if you remember, for those of you who have attended our other webinars, we have addressed return post-illness in our earlier webinars. But remember, no one returns without medical clearance, even if their tests are negative. Again, a lot of responsibility falls on clubs. Clubs must ensure that they obtain current consent to use the facilities that they are where they're going to train, and their responsibility is also to ensure that the facility has permission to be open. Not just that they have permission to use the facility, but that the facility itself has permission to be open. And this should include stipulated days and times. They should be aware of and adhere to regulations governing the use of such facility and communicate recommendations, restrictions, or regulations for the use of the facility with all the club members, the athletes, the coaches, etc. As was mentioned previously tonight, there must be a limit on the size of the training group. 12 people, and this is not 12 athletes, this is 12 persons, including the coach and the designated compliance monitor. If a club has more than one training group, they should not be mixed. And this includes coaches. Training groups should train separately. There must be pre-participation screening of all athletes prior to resuming training. And in this pre-participation training, you must expect, again, we went through testing, that a PCR test done 3 days prior to return must be negative. And I'm not sure where we are going to go as far as vaccines are concerned, but I'm not sure if this is that it must be negative even if the vaccine has been administered, meaning if you should take a test even if there has been a vaccine administered. But let's at this point in time say yes, a PCR test is necessary and to be negative even if you've had a vaccine. There must be medical clearance and something that's going to be instituted, an updated COVID-19 questionnaire, which should be checked prior to each session. Written consent from the parent or guardian where practical. Protocol is to be circulated before resumption of any training. In other words, athletes, coaches, compliance monitor, everyone who is participating must know the protocol. One must record temperatures at the start of training of the athlete and the official actually, but the official must get there and the compliance monitor must be there early. And a temperature of 37.5 or above means that the athlete will be restricted from training and denied entry. If it's a child, the parents or someone under 18, the parents must be notified where appropriate and advised to seek medical attention. If symptoms occur while at training, the individual must immediately inform the coach and compliance monitor and then leave. Again, reiterate the necessity to contact their physician. A contact list, an accurate contact list, addresses, telephone numbers must be kept, and the coach and compliance monitors themselves should be educated in all this. A word about facilities. I mean, what constitutes an appropriate facility or training site? This is an area that has been sanctioned for such use according to governmental protocols, spacious and outdoors, and the training group size obviously will depend on the space that's available because physical distancing is still paramount. The area must be safe and secure and the access must be manageable. No sense saying that you have 12 people training and anybody can walk through the training site at the time. The areas must be clearly designated with clear signage for entry and exit. We're trying not to have people milling around where there is entry and exit. So one unidirectional flow for coming and going. The area must be designated for bags to be stored and for other paraphernalia to be stored. In training and competition, all stakeholders must be comprehensively educated on the rules for sanitization according to the facility. This is where the compliance monitor comes in. That person must ensure regular sanitization of frequently touched areas before, during, and after training, ensure sanitization of equipment, ensure spare masks are available, and monitor adherence to the rules. Where possible, enough pieces of equipment so that sharing is not necessary should be had. And where not possible, each athlete must sanitize the equipment after use. And again, this is where the compliance monitor also comes in. Officials should arrive before training with enough time to supervise the arrival of athletes and ensure adherence to protocols. And all officials should be masked, except if they're actively demonstrating something, but all officials should be masked. Recommendations for the athletes, and these are self-explanatory really, but I'll go through fairly quickly. Recommend that to your parents, none should attend training sessions. Only athletes or coaches should attend training sessions. Athletes must bring their own water and not share water or other juices with or other water bottles with other athletes. Don't share food, utensils, towels, etc. Athletes should always maintain the appropriate 2-meter distance between each other. No touch, face, eyes, mouth, etc. With or without unwashed hands unless absolutely necessary. Don't shake hands, no high five. Celebrating, no embracing, and where possible, use your own equipment. Clean any equipment before and after your training session. Always remember, don't wear a face mask during vigorous activity and during training. No spitting or any other antisocial event or activity like that. If it's necessary, find a bathroom. All right. I'll move on fairly quickly because I've probably gone over my time. Current symptoms that might suggest that a person has COVID-19. We should all know these, but I'm sure that we all do already. Fever, chills, coughing, shortness of breath, sore throat, loss of taste, loss of smell, difficulty swallowing, runny nose, pink eye, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach aches, extreme tiredness, fainting. However, note that a number of these things, especially extreme tiredness, fainting, these are also symptoms of heat illnesses. So your compliance monitor, your coach, you yourself should be aware of these things. And not everything is COVID, and heat illness can bring about your demise much more quickly than COVID in the short term. So let's review. Outdoor training, if at all possible, only participants may enter the facility, organize one access point to the facility, organize arrival and departure times to avoid socializing. Coaches should arrive early. Athletes might need to bring a change of clothing to training, and this is especially if you're taking public transport. Get into training, train, get out as soon as possible. Be prepared for training prior to arrival at the venue. Hand hygiene regularly during training. Sufficiently available hand sanitizer, pre and post training. Wear your mask. Don't share bottles. Don't train if you're unwell. Don't touch equipment or don't touch what's necessary not to touch. Disinfect thoroughly. Cough into your sleeve or your shirt. No handshaking or high fives. Shower as soon as you get home. Now, should a vaccine be urged? One thing. Second, should we suggest player contracts be considered? And player contracts take into consideration such things as the rubric will go something like all participants of the Amateur Athletic Association of Barbados agree to abide by the following expectations when entering facilities and when participating in club activities under the COVID-19 return to sport protocol. And then you go on, I agree to symptom screening checks, etc. So we do things like this, and we follow the health protocols. I'll say that the comprehensive return to play protocol will be available for all when it's completely ready, which will be very shortly, and so that all may peruse, all may understand, because in this case, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope that this has shed some light on some things that you might not have known and reiterated some things that you already knew. Thanks so much.
Dr. Harper, thank you very, very much for your presentation. Let me begin by a couple of questions were here for you from even earlier before you started your presentations. The first one is, why are persons allowed to go into the supermarket without being temperature checked? But the AAB and other organizations must do temperature checks for their training and for their activities.
I'm not sure if persons are allowed to go into supermarkets without being temperature checked, but let's say there are. The AAB doesn't run supermarkets, the AAB runs the AAB. And if we're going to follow the rules of the AAB, we're going to have the temperature checks. As I said right at the beginning, the AAB is a responsible organization, and the science, medical science and specific science says do temperature checks. It actually stands to reason. Perhaps the supermarkets and those who do not enforce temperature checks might want to look at themselves and take a leaf out of the book of the AAB.
Thank you, Dr. Harper. There's another question for you, Dr. Harper. If a person is vaccinated, is it possible that that person can have a positive COVID test?
Yes, it is entirely possible that that person can have a positive COVID test for a number of reasons. Not all persons who are being vaccinated are being tested. Some persons in the 50-odd thousand persons who have already been vaccinated, I am sure have had COVID and been asymptomatic. If you've already had COVID, your antibodies will probably be still high, and the antigen may well take time before it becomes negative. Also, depending on how long after you've had the vaccine, and especially the second dose of the vaccine, it is still entirely possible for you to return a positive COVID test. However, with the first vaccine, you're asked to wait until 3 weeks, 22 days specifically until it takes effect. And usually by this time, the antigenic response has tailed off. It is not specific. I have seen no specific scientific information regarding how long it lasts after the second shot.
Okay. There's a question here. It says it is directed at Dr. Harper, but I suspect that it goes between both Dr. Harper and the Athletics Association and Ms. Jordan particularly. It says, will athletes who have become of age over 18, will they require a vaccination to compete in AAB meets?
If you don't mind,
go right ahead, Doc.
I'd like to pass that on to Madam President.
Okay.
I suspect that she would be able to answer that much better than I might.
No, we went to a meeting last week with the BOA, and not even the Olympics. The organizers of the Olympics are not mandating vaccines at that level. So if they're at the top level, they're recommending, but not mandating. So we're way down at the bottom, and I'm not hearing anybody, not even Donna, for Carifta, nobody is mandating vaccine. Everybody is recommending vaccine. So force, being mandatory, no.
Mr. Ambassador, if I might just say, this is a minefield, as you know, and as I suppose we all know, you know, we don't want to get into the legal ramifications or the other things that go with this. You can't force anyone to do anything. There might come a time when it is necessary because of travel restrictions, etc., for people to have their completed vaccine cards, but it's as I said, a minefield, and perhaps left until sometime later.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
I'm going to open the floor now for general questions. I've got a number of questions already that are directed at our presenters who have already given their submissions this evening. I'll start first with the hard ones, with the provocative ones. Mrs. Jordan, this is from a Mr. Ellsworth Linton. The AAB has been missing for a while now. How do you come now and try to make it seem as though things are as usual?
I would like to ask Mr. Linton, where were we missing from? Where were we to be that we weren't? If he wants to put in chat and tell me, we went in the preseason right up to where the government shut us down. If the government says pause, we have to pause. If the government says lockdown, we have to lock down. So maybe Mr. Linton could tell me where the AB was missing from. We went right up to December and we paused in January and February on the instruction of the Barbados government. So maybe he can put in the chat and let us know where we were missing from.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. There's a question here for Mrs. Raynor. Let me tell you, there are a number of questions for you. The first one is, with no spectators allowed, will those persons who bought tickets for last year be reimbursed? Those persons who bought tickets for the competition, will they be reimbursed this year?
Well, I'll answer that question. Number one, as I've stated, as of today or as of next week, we are saying no spectators because of the status of COVID. In August, that status might be different and we may allow spectators. But as of today, there are persons that have been coming in and getting refunds to their tickets. So yes, refunding. If persons want to get refunded for their tickets, they can very well get refunded for their tickets. But as I said, as of today, as of next week, there's no spectators in August, it could be, but yes, you can get refunded for your tickets.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a question here. You know, this webinar reads like a who's who of track and field in Barbados. There's a question here for you, Mrs. Amanda, from Elvis Ford. Elvis is asking, will countries be kept in pods at the stadium except for the period of time when they're competing?
Countries?
Yeah, this is for Mrs. Rayner.
Oh,
At
for
the
that.
Caribbean Games, will countries be kept in pods at the national stadium except for during the periods of time when they're actually competing?
But the way that we're looking at it, especially if countries come on charters, and I know our NECAC president has been in discussion and looking at bringing the athletes and the officials in by charters. If the athletes and officials arrive via charters, then they are in the bubble from the time they get on the plane to the time they arrive in Bermuda. So in those charters, there could be mixing of countries. So as I said, from a transportation standpoint, when the athletes arrive, they will be put in buses and the transportation based on how they came in on charters. So at this point in time, we're not looking specifically at countries being put away from other countries. But as anyone that's been to Carifta would be aware, when we organize accommodations, it's always organized via countries anyway. The way that the hotel is organized, you can have countries in separate areas. It's like a little village, the way that the hotel is organized. So those countries can be staying on their own away from other countries. But what we have to recognize as well is once you get to the competition, you're going to have athletes competing against each other from other countries. So it will be very difficult to say you're going to have countries separated, but they're going to compete all together at the same time. As I said, you know, our thing is to keep everyone in the same bubble. And as I said, team managers are going to be very important to make sure that everyone adheres to the guidance.
Thank you, Mrs. Rayner. There's another question here from Obadeli Thompson. If there's a positive test, will the whole team potentially be quarantined? Will other athletes from those teams be allowed to continue competing? Will the Bermuda government allow athletes to travel while under quarantine? And if not, will they remain at the hotels?
The athletes will have to, if they test positive, they will have to remain at the hotel. And as I said, because these athletes are between the age of 14 and 20, there will have to be an official that will have to remain with them. Probably not in the same room, but an athlete will have to oversee that athlete because they are underage. I'm thinking of what the other question was.
If there's a positive test, will the whole team potentially be quarantined? Will other athletes from that team be allowed to continue to compete? And will the Bermuda government allow athletes to travel while under quarantine? If not, will they remain at their hotels?
But the contact tracing will be based on athletes or persons that person that tested positive comes in contact with. That person could possibly test positive and not have been around their team. So contact tracing is going to be very important. And that's what the quarantine is going to be based on. You know, once that athlete or official tests positive, then they will have to state who they've been around, who they've been in contact with. So it may not be the entire team. And I know in the European Championships, they had a relay team, somebody in the relay team tested positive. That relay team was put in quarantine, not the entire team. The entire team wasn't put in quarantine. The quarantine goes by who you've been in contact with. So unless they've been in contact with the entire team, then it's a possibility the entire team will have to be in quarantine. But contact tracing, and Dr. Harper, you can state if I'm incorrect, but contact tracing is based on who you have contacted.
Harper, any comments? Dr. Harper?
It is as Mrs. Rayner said, my challenge would be that contact tracing could sometimes take time, and obviously doing testing after contact tracing also takes time. So it might be difficult, but Mrs. Renner is quite correct. Just like outside of the athletic fraternity, contact tracing is necessary if someone becomes positive. And at any rate, as she indicated earlier, there will be PCR tests done during the competition anyhow. So we will be able to pick up whoever is positive pretty early.
Okay, thank you. There is a question here. I know a little bit about this one. First of all, if you have tested positive for COVID-19, you're not allowed to fly on any aircraft, any commercial aircraft. That I know for sure from the International Civil Aviation Organization. That's one of the rules. So if someone tests positive and you've got to go into quarantine for 14 days until you, or for whatever period of time until you test negative to travel, who bears the cost of that person being housed in Bermuda? Does that fall to the Bermuda government?
I think I answered that. Maybe the person wasn't there. Basically, right now that's under discussion. It's not just under discussion with the Bermuda government, but it's also under discussion with NACAC. We all have to reach a decision whether, Bermuda's going to be responsible for that athlete and official or whoever that has to stay in the hotel for that 14 days, because as you know, they will not be able to travel because they've tested positive. So that discussion has to take place and an agreement has to be made, whether it is the local organization, is it NACAC that assists with that cost. So at this point in time, I can't really give an answer because that is still something under discussion. Basically, we put a document together where we have a lot of if-and scenarios. So we have the if-and scenarios, but now we've got to come to a place and say, okay, what happens if this happens? What happens if an athlete tests positive? So right now, we're still in the process of having that discussion. So I can't say whether we're going to take the cost, probably not the government, or is it going to be NACAC that's going to take up the cost or assist with the cost?
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Maynard, there's a question for you. It says here, qualifying standards. When will the qualification standards for the various regional and international meets be published? And also in relation to CARIFTA Games, what is the qualification period?
Again, that is not really a technical problem, not a problem, but a technical question, in that those things are decided by the board. And I know that there's work being done on that behind the scenes, but it's not particularly pertaining to the technical end of competition, which is the responsibility of the technical committee. I don't know if Ms. Jordan would like to answer that.
So athletes, coaches, the standards committee met on the standards, the criteria for selection that would include the qualifying period, the period that we start, and everything related to the regional and international meets. We are in the process. So it now must go from the committee to the board, and that's where it is. So a committee has met, it now has to move to board. Once we get to the board, we'll get it to you as quickly as possible. But everything will be done way before the first meet on the 24th April.
Thank you very much. Gerard Mason, your hand is up. Go ahead with your question or comment, please.
Good night, everyone. My question is to Mario. Are you currently in a bubble with your post-collegiate group, and if you're not, how do you go about practice in terms of like protocols and stuff? Do you train by yourself, or do you all do social distancing? Like, how does that work over there?
Well, no, currently right now we're not in a bubble. We get COVID tested every 2 weeks. So that's how that goes. And so say for instance, if I was to miss the COVID test one morning, I won't be able to come to the facility because they will keep track of who missed their test, who didn't show up, or stuff like that. So that's how that works for training. And in terms of social distance, yeah, we do. We got our specific time where we come to the track to train, and it's more like a get in, get out. We don't really socialize much with the other, because I train on the college campus, so we don't really socialize much, of course, with the college guys. So it's not really a bubble, but it's distant. So there's not much contact with everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burke. There is a question here from Mrs. Rayner. Someone said they may have missed it. The individual tests that are done, the PCR tests that are done daily, who bears that cost?
Okay, so we are working with government, and basically the government have stated that they will provide us with the PCR test. We have to supply the medical personnel. I am in discussion right now with a person that's going to take on the medical lead and create her medical team. So at this point, there are no costs. In Bermuda, there are no costs for tests. I mean, right now we're getting several school children tested because there has been an outbreak. So the PCR tests at this point are at no cost.
Okay, thank you. There's another question here. It's coming from Henry Innes, also known to us in track and field in Barbados. Henry asks, CARIFTA was just put back by 6 weeks. Has a new schedule of build-up competitions been published? Who is going to take that? I suspect Ms. Jordan, that is targeted at us, at the AAB, and not necessarily Mrs. Rayner.
So so Henry, hi, how are you? Our local schedule, I believe that, is he talking about the 7 meets? He probably came in late. The 7 meets that we have scheduled between April 24 and July 2 down from nationals. Is that what he's talking about?
I suspect it is. Mrs. Maynard actually.
He probably came late, but Ms. Maynard outlined that, Henry, if you came in late, we have 7 competitions planned. I was checking the other night while we were talking at NACA. I think Canada has 8 or 9. So it's in the range of 7 to 9 competitions done. I don't know how many you have, but it's usually in the range of, well, what I've heard recently, it's in the range of 7 to 9 meets for most people.
I think Mrs. Maynard actually covered the issue when she said that there would be, our season usually ends with our national championship. But for this year, there are 2 meets subsequent to the national championship. You care to elaborate, Mrs. Maynard?
Yes, I can. We've started obviously later. We're not starting until February because of what has happened. And some of our meets have been pushed further down, particularly like CARIFTA, and we do have one going even further down than CARIFTA. So when we were planning the competition schedule, all of those things were taken in place so that we didn't cut off rigidly like we normally do at nationals, but there are 4 meets before nationals, and then 2 after that, so that the athletes, thank you, that are going to compete beyond down in August and September do have some time, which is an added thing to it because we started late. Here we are with the 2 meets that come after nationals, which is July 10th and 11th, which again our meets are numbered, but they will get proper names later, and July 24th and 25th, which is the final preparation meet. And this has been done so as to give athletes the best possible time allowed to train for their competitions.
Okay, that is very, very good, very helpful. There is a question from Mrs. Rayner. I heard you make reference to the media and where the media will be housed, but there's a question from Mr. Dennis Allen, who has asked, are there any specific protocols for the media for the CARIFTA Games 2021?
Yes, you may or may not be aware, but NACAC has a media committee, which is led by Kwame. I can't think of his last name right now. Lawrence, Kwame Lawrence. So he is basically coordinating and putting together all of the protocol when it comes to media at all of the NACAC events. So we will be taking his lead and basically putting into place whatever they state needs to be in place for the media. But as stated in the presentation, we are looking at one hotel for all of the media to be housed, and we're looking at making sure that we provide transportation. Once Kwame comes up with the guidelines, then every event that's held by NACAC will follow those guidelines from the media commission.
We may only have time to take a couple more questions. Thank you, Mrs. Rayner, but there is one question for Ms. Jordan and Mrs. Maynard. How does a person go about becoming a monitor at the track and field meets in Barbados, a COVID monitor?
So the club's COVID monitor come with them to competitions, because the club must police itself, must see it for the club's COVID monitor. So you can be selected as a monitor with your club, because the monitor must start from training and take that club into competition. But if there is somebody who wants to work with the AAB compliance team, then all that person has to do is to call Raquel at 537-4684 at the office and say to her, I want to be part of the AAB's compliance team. We are grateful for any volunteers that we can get at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to remind you as well that you can raise your hand in the Zoom, and that you can participate in, you don't just have to send in your question via the chat. You can actually raise your hand and you will be allowed to pose your question or your comment. There's a question coming from Mr. Gabriel Burnett. He says he's not sure if he missed it, but will the qualifying period for these games be cut off at nationals, or will it go on beyond?
When the, Gabriel, when the document comes out, and we're going to struggle to get it out as soon as possible, they might have to do a board meeting quickly this week to make sure that those standards and everything and the criteria come out. We have them, we just have to change. But we have then to sit down. For example, we take guidance on the qualifying for the seniors from the BOA for the what you call that one, the Olympics, and from Pan Am. For ours, we work backward from the date of competition and so on. So these things are at committee, as I said to you, but we didn't say it here tonight, but we're gonna try as much as possible to get it to you as quickly as possible. There were times before that qualifying periods went past nationals. I don't know if Ms. Maynard has a memory, but we have done that before, where we, especially for something like, there's a meet in September. So if we are gonna have a meet, especially where people are still competing elsewhere, we do sometimes allow qualification beyond nationals. So we look at it, and I don't know which specific you're looking at, but we will get the specifics towards the end of this week coming up. Not this week, next week.
Thank you, madam.
Today's Saturday.
Carrie Beckles, Ms. Carrie Beckles, you have your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good night, everyone. This question is for Ms. Jordan. As you know, everybody's planning, especially the senior athletes. We usually plan for local meets, local-based athletes. We look at the AAB schedule locally, and then we look at the US-based meets as well. And I believe Mario is probably going to face this. I've touched base with a couple of my old teammates, and those are in college, where they're not allowing pro athletes or post-collegiates into the collegiate meets if you're not associated with the school. So within the Caribbean, I know Jamaica has started their track meets on weekends. Do we have to go through the association to be authorized to compete in different countries for their track meets, or can we go as normal and email the meet directors to gain entry into these meets?
You have never sought our permission. I think what you would do is to let us know you're going, just in case you would do a performance that that you need us to recognize. So I think that's a private thing. The question is, and I will have to discuss that with the media group and Dr. Harper, with the medical group. When you are coming back, how do we, Dr. Harper, how do we reintegrate athletes that have been visiting places like Jamaica? I think Jamaica's positivity rate now is over 30. So how do we, I will have to lean on Dr. Harper Carey to guide me through how I reintegrate people who have traveled like that back into our system, especially if you go to somewhere like with a positivity rate that is that high. Dr. Harper?
Yes, good evening, Kerry. It's not simple, certainly not a simple answer, one size fits all. It depends on where you have been. It depends on when your last test was. And clearly it also depends on whether you've been vaccinated and if there are any symptoms. Suffice it to say that you will start by having a PCR test within a negative PCR test within from 3 days prior, and then you will be contact tracing will also be done. And when I say that, not in a dramatic way, but you will, and the onus is on you to make sure that none of your colleagues have tested positive. None of the people with whom you've been associated have been tested positive. So as I said, it's not a cookie cutter thing, but it depends on the individual person. But start by knowing that you'll be tested, and until you have a negative PCR test from 3 days before, you'll not be allowed to compete or to train. And also remember, there's also a quarantine for anyone coming back into Barbados. Not necessarily at a hotel or wherever, but there is also a quarantine, and this also will be recognized by the AAB. I'm not sure if this answers your question completely, but this is something that we will be working on, again, depending on where you're coming from.
Yes, it answers it, because the meets I was looking at were in Florida, some in Texas, if they allow the internationals or pro athletes to compete. I will touch base with Mario after here to find out how Houston is setting up, just in case they have meets that allow international athletes or pros to come and compete. You do answer it. My only concern is I was considering the vaccine, but I have to touch base with Dr. Lord with my outlying medical issues and the side effects that come with the vaccine, because the side effects that I'm hearing from those who have taken it, teachers and some athletes, those kind of trigger some of my illnesses. So I have some concerns on, if I do decide to travel and how I prepare for the upcoming Olympics. So you did answer the question, and I'll just have to touch base with Dr. Lord and the association when it comes to traveling, to make sure I have everything in order before I do make a decision on what I do as the season is getting closer.
Okay.
Understood.
We have another question here, Dr. Harper from One Tab Sports Agency. If an athlete wants a vaccination, will he or she be given priority? As side effects can differ between individuals, would it make sense if they're allowed to get it sooner rather than later?
The availability of vaccines is at the complete discretion of the government, the Ministry of Health. One can make representation for athletes who are going to be representing the country at the highest level, indeed at any level, because we don't discriminate, but at any level, if an athlete requests help, one can make representation. But I'd urge you not to not to assume that representation means that there will be a positive answer, because the government has its own protocol for rolling out the vaccines. So representation might be made, consideration might be given, but it's not a guarantee. The athletes, especially the elite athletes who travel to Barbados and travel back out, and want to have not had vaccines before, should, if they are going to be coming into the island, let us know, let the executive know, the council know in very quick order when they are going to be in, just communicate when they're going to be in, and when their departure date is, so that if it is possible, representation might be made.
Okay, thank you very, very much. There are two other questions. I'll put these two into one from Ms. Jordan. The first one is the AAB contemplating assisting athletes who want to travel overseas to compete in international meets or regional meets, given the fact that the AAB has a limited schedule? And two, if an athlete comes home for the national championship from overseas, is the AAB contemplating creating its own bubble for those athletes? Ms. Jordan.
So, no, we can answer the last one first. The last board meeting, we meet the third Thursday of each month. So I think it was last week. In our last board meeting, we started to try to see if we can answer that last question. What will we do for athletes who might be contemplating coming home for nationals? So that is engaging us at this time. We didn't have a definitive answer then. So that one will be answered soon. And then the other one was, is the AAB considering assisting athletes who are traveling overseas? For me, is that what the first one was?
Yes, that's it.
So assistance in what way? I think I would prefer that person to ask me specifically what assistance. I don't want to make an assumption. So can somebody probably put a little quick thing in the chat? When you say assistance, can you say quickly, if you want to raise your hand or put a little note, what do you mean assistance?
I will play devil's advocate, Madam Chair and Madam President. I believe that they're talking about financial assistance. I know there's some, I suspect that's what they mean. I don't know.
So somebody said financially.
And somebody put it in the chat. They said financially.
So we do the same thing about assistance to athletes every time. There's no newness about it. We go to corporate Barbados that's suffering because of COVID like we are. We go to the DOA and we go to the government through the National Sports Council. That list was put together previously, and because we didn't know what we were asking or for whom we were asking, because we had no performances since 2019, except the athlete was an athlete who was receiving funding under the Olympic Solidarity or one of those other programs. We are now taking that list that we had compiled before the shutdown, before we knew. Now when we see what an athlete or the athletes have performances and so, then we can put that list together. And that's what we're doing now, because we know things are happening now. The people overseas are going outdoors and so that list is going to be pulled back up and sent back out. So I'm going to say yes, but I'm also going to be very honest with you. It depends on who the athlete is. And the AAB supports the athlete that has potential to bring medals to Barbados. So it depends on who the athlete is. I don't want to fool you that the AAB supports every athlete financially. We see performances. You're either in category 1 for us, 2 or 3. And once you fit the criteria that we've established in those, that's why we pick performances and we watch people and so on, then we will go and you will get your assistance. But it does not mean that every athlete from Barbados that leaves gets financial assistance. So I want to make that very clear.
Okay. Before we close, I want to, there's one other question here, and we're going to close on a high for Mario Burke. And the person asks, what can we expect from Mario Burke on the track outdoors in 2021?
To sum it up, I guess you could say you could expect the best from me. Just know that I'm working hard every day, trying to maximize the most of my potential, trying to become a student more of the sport, trying to learn stuff about myself, other greats that come before me. So I feel like this year is just about me just showcasing my work, my talent, and just becoming, evolving to the best sprinter and the best Mario that I could be. So I'm really excited for this season. I think the signs right now are showing that it's going to be a promising season.
Okay. There's another question here. Good night from Desiree. What is the state of repairs of the National Stadium and its availability for use as a training and or competition venue? That's the first question.
Who are you looking to answer that, Noah?
I believe that's centered at you.
Okay. Desiree, good night to you. So this is how I'm going to say. The National Stadium is the property of the Barbados government and is managed by the National Sports Council. I'm not the chairman of the National Sports Council, and therefore I am not authorized to speak for the National Sports Council. But what I can say to you is I will go to the Sports Council if you want me to get an official answer from the Sports Council. And they authorize me to speak, I will represent you and your question to the National Sports Council, and I'll come back with an answer and I'll call you and give it to you. But I cannot speak for the National Sports Council.
Okay. There's a question from Gabriel Burnett again. For the international meets, I do not see World Juniors on the schedule. Is the AAB's decision for Barbados, or is that meet off?
Ms. Maynard, wasn't that on the schedule? Ms. Maynard?
You're on mute, Mrs. Maynard. I believe you're on mute, Mrs. Maynard.
As I was saying, we have been considering it, and we're looking at we know that you cannot go to Carifta and go to World Juniors. One meet finishes on the 15th, the other one starts on the 17th. What we would have to look at from the point of view, and this is where Ms. Jordan could really pick us up. If you're talking about competing, the association will have to determine if they are going to send a particular athlete to one or other of the competitions, but they cannot go to both based on scheduling.
So always let's be realistic. There's a 2-day window between Carifta. Am I right, Donna? Yes. Esther? Yes. There's a 2-day window between Carifta and World Juniors. Yes. World Juniors is is on the African continent. There is no way an athlete can go to Carifta and go to Kenya at the same time. So if the athlete's time or distance approximate World Juniors time, and we take everything into consideration for that athlete, the security in Kenya, the movement to get to Kenya in this COVID time, and we take that into consideration, and we make a decision with parents and coaches to send an under-20 athlete to Kenya. That athlete cannot realistically go to Carifta and World Juniors at the same time. We're talking about 2-day window. The other thing that I discussed when this came up is, do we have to do the 3-day or 5-day quarantine when we get to Kenya? And if that is the case, then that creates an additional problem for anybody who goes to Carifta to get to World Juniors. Because if you have to leave Bermuda, go to Kenya, that I think that would be, let's say that's 2 days travel. And then you have to quarantine for 3 to 5 days. I don't know what their system says. We gotta really, really discuss these things intelligently. And those are things that we started at the board to discuss. I don't think that we said no, but there are considerations. Who will go? If that top tier athlete wants to go, and we can answer all those questions, but the person who is not close to approximating that standard might be the one to go to CRIFTA. We haven't come down one side or the other, but I'll tell you, we have laid out all the things that made sense, and some things make sense, and you don't need a rocket scientist to make those decisions for you. I don't know if that answers you, Gabriel.
I believe it does for me. Ms. Jordan, there's a question for you from Geraldine. First of all, Desiree says thank you. It's much appreciated. And then Geraldine is asking, the categories that you laid out, category 1, 2, and 3, can you explain how these how athletes are categorized? What criteria do you use to categorize these athletes?
So these are simple. The people in the top category for us were people who do times and distances from Pan Am up. So it's Worlds, Olympics, so on. And it's all performance-based. So the next category would be the ones between CAC and Pan Am. And then the category will be the juniors and what we call the top juniors, the emerging athletes, and so on. We do, everything we do can be measured, Geraldine. We don't make subjective decisions in this board, and all our decisions can be measured, and we don't favor. So you could be the brightest spark, but we look at performances and we pick teams based on performances. We assist based on performances. Everything we do is performance-based.
Okay. There's a question here from Mr. Tom Brown. CRIFTA was pushed back to just 2 days before other international meets. Do you feel that this time was the best time period?
This is Donna?
Yeah, this is from Mrs. Rana.
As was stated, the dates for CRIFTA was July the 3rd to the 5th. We only last week found out that the CXCX SAMs are going to be June the 14th to July 16th. So of course, that affects the majority of the English-speaking Caribbean countries. It doesn't affect Bermuda, but it does affect the other countries, the exam. So it was no way that we can host, we would have been able to host CRIFTA July the 3rd to the 5th. So basically the NACAC team sat down and we looked at the NACAC calendar and we looked at the World Athletics calendar. Also remembering that the Olympics also finish on the 8th. No event can take place during the Olympics. So that limited the time frame that we had. So the only weekend that we had available was August the 3rd to the 13th to the 15th. So we had two options. We either try to have CRIFTA August 13th to the 15th, or we cancel CRIFTA games altogether for 2021. No one around the table wanted to say the word cancel. So we all decided that we would go with August 13th to the 15th. We had a representative from Jamaica who was part of that decision-making team. And if we all know, Jamaica sends a good team to CRIFTA. They also send a good team to any world events. Basically, what Jamaica stated to us is that they will look at having representatives for both of those events. They possibly have an A team and they probably have a B team. So they can send the A team to World Juniors and the B team. And I think for most of our small countries, if we send one athlete to World Juniors, and that's usually a spot that's given to us, we do. I think the standards for World Juniors are quite high compared to each country making their own standards. So at the end of the day, it's up to the country to decide if they want to send a team to Carifta or if they would prefer to send a team to World Juniors, or as Ms. Catherine, as Ms. Jordan said, maybe there's only one athlete and they have to make a decision that has met the standards. Remember, the athletes have to meet the standards of World Juniors. They can't just go to World Juniors, whereas Carifta is based on the country standards. So, I mean, we had a choice. We either have it August 13th to the 15th or we cancel. And I don't think anyone wanted to look at canceling the Carifta Games for a second year.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is that hour approaching 8:30. We had actually scheduled to conclude this event at 8 p.m., but the questions were coming fast and furious and they were interesting. Before we close though, I want to give President Catherine Jordan the last word before we wrap up.
Well, last words usually are associated with a funeral and death. But I will close the meeting by saying two things. One, I want to reassure athletes, coaches, clubs and schools administrators that we are going to do what is in the best interest of athletes. We are going to, but I want them to help us ensure that when competitions start, that the COVID-19 monitoring team, the national COVID-19 monitoring team, does not shut us down. How do we do that? You have to ensure that you have your athletes understand that this is serious business. We wrote the longest letter I've written to the Attorney General to ask that we open for training. I want you to adhere to the protocols. I want to ask you to follow all those things that Dr. Harper said. I want to ask you to bring some officials to help us to ensure, I mean clubs and schools and parents, to help us to ensure that when the monitoring committee, I do not know any, I just know the head of the monitoring committee, and I guess everybody knows him and he doesn't go anywhere anymore. So he could send you anybody. I just want us to be clear that when the monitoring committee turns up either at training or competition, that we are complying with all the promises I made in the letter we made to the, that we wrote to the Attorney General. I want to say to you that I'm gonna send you those protocols. Dr. Harper is gonna give those back to me by tomorrow or Monday. And we are going to send them to you so you too are familiar with all the things we're talking. But this is these are your competitions. These 7 meets are for you to ensure that your dreams are not deferred like last year. So I want as much cooperation as possible from all of us. This is not about the board. This is not about a particular club. All of us now have to understand that we sink together or we swim together. It is up to us. That's really all I'm saying. The board wants to do as much as possible for you, but it has to be with your cooperation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very, very much for the opportunity this evening to interact with you and to have chaired this very special meeting. The dynamic and easy nature of modern technology now offers us a constant gateway to the brains and to the hands and the hearts of the most highly skilled and highly trained people in our societies. And I really want to thank you for having participated in this very informative, very enlightening event this evening. I remind all of you to continue to follow the AAB and stay up to date with what is going on. We are on Facebook and on Instagram at AA Barbados. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube, Athletics Association of Barbados. I want to thank the presenters, Ms. Catherine Jordan, our president, Mrs. Donna Rayner, the president of the Athletics Association of Bermuda, Mrs. Esther Maynard, who's given so much to track and field in Barbados, Mr. Mario Burke. I was going to say up and coming, but he's no longer up and coming. Already very established senior athlete, and Dr. Llewellyn Harper, who also continues to give so much to sports in Barbados and to this association. It has been a pleasure hosting you this evening. We hope that you will continue to follow us with the events that are upcoming. God bless you all. Have a wonderful evening, and the rest of your weekend, please enjoy in safety and care. Good evening.
Will the presenters and the MC stay?